Thank you so much, Roseanne. A very inspiring story, not only because your son is so talented, as we heard when he played the cello earlier, but also because you were able to impact policy by asking some questions, you know. Just sometimes raising a question or two, a pertinent question, can make people pause and say, wait a minute, why don't we have anyone with autism in the magnet program? So thank you for that. When I am not running for Congress, I'm teaching. I'm also a teacher with the Los Angeles Unified School District. I've been with the district for 15 years. I've had students mainstreamed into my English class, and very fortunate to have had great aides and people who have illuminated the way for me as to how best to be effective. Unfortunately, right now with these budget cuts, we're seeing reduced services, special ed cuts, lots of wonderful programs are on the chopping block. So I encourage all of us to be advocates, strong advocates for education here. I'd like to introduce our panel. The first person who's going to speak here is Deborah Merlin, who I mentioned before. Deborah Merlin is the author of Victory Over ADHD. As the mother of very premature twins with challenging health problems, she found that doctors and professionals often said to her, well, what kind of drug do you want? And she was looking for something other than just drugs. So she committed herself to researching this, alternative methods. She's a frequent guest on radio shows in the United States and Canada, and she works as a consultant as well. So Deborah, welcome, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Marcy. I'm going to discuss connecting the dots to what I believe caused my twins' neurological disorders. The first dot started with me, growing up in New Jersey in the mid-50s to early 70s, where DDT, the pesticide, was sprayed every summer to kill the mosquitoes. We were told to stay indoors while the trucks drove down the street, spraying the pesticide everywhere. As soon as the trucks passed, I'd be back outside climbing trees, catching frogs, while I was being exposed to DDT. Some of the symptoms of pesticide exposure are inability to think, poor concentration, hyperactivity, poor coordination, weakness, nervousness, breathing, twitching, muscle pains, and thyroid disorders. People became alarmed over the amount of DDT being used, and the US government began to phase out the use of DDT in 1972. Unfortunately, toxic pesticides are still being used everywhere. And the second dot was in the early 60s, candy cost 5 cents each. And one of my earliest childhood memories was taking 25 cents and walking 1 mile to the corner store and buying 5 candy bars. And I would eat all of them before I returned home so my mother would not find out about my secret sugar addiction. And eating too much sugar can cause overgrowth of fungus in the body. And too much fungus can cause brain fog and digestive disorders. The third dot was going to the dentist to have my 15 cavities filled with amalgam fillings containing mercury. Mercury toxicity can lead to many neurological disorders, including attention deficit disorder, autism, and bipolar, schizophrenia, and brain seizures. There was no label at the time for my learning disabilities, and the teachers were very frustrated with me not being able to pay attention. No matter how hard I tried, my attention span would last about 15 seconds. Now I'm 34 years old, and I'm giving birth to very premature twin boys. And it was not unusual for twins to have developmental disorders or delays. So from the time they were 3 through 12 years old, we received conflicting diagnoses from autism, Asperger's, and attention deficit disorder. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding if vaccines causes autism and other neurological disorders. And in the book, A Shot in the Dark, authors Barbara Lowe Fisher and Harris Coulter list conditions when vaccines should be withheld. They are an immediate family member who has neurological disorder or having seizures. Components used in vaccines that you may be allergic to, such as eggs, casein, thimerosal, which is mercury, and anyway, and also premature birth weight and chronic or recent illness. Now, both my twins, being they were born 10 weeks early, they both weighed around 3 pounds each. And one of my twins, Wesley, spent the first 4 months in the NICU. The first month of his life, he was on a ventilator for he had hyaline membrane disease, which is underdeveloped lungs. And when he was 3 months old, or 3 weeks old, he developed meningitis and staph infection at the same time. He was released from the NICU when he was 4 months old, just weighing 7 pounds. Once he came home, he had to be hospitalized 4 more times. Now, growing up, both my twins had asthma, frequent ear and respiratory infections, and one of my twins, Wesley, had a violent temper with no impulse control, facial tics, and seizures. We had both my twins tested for heavy metal toxicity when they were in 5th grade, and we found that both of them had cadmium, mercury, and aluminum present in their heavy metal testing, and they both had lead levels considered unsafe by the Environmental Protection Agency. The good news is that my kids and I made a remarkable recovery by removing heavy metals through chelation therapy, and I had my amalgam fillings removed since my mercury level came back in the very elevated range. We stopped taking frequent antibiotics for dairy infections. For ear infections, which turned out to be for a dairy allergy, and we replaced processed foods with organic whole foods, and we eliminated all artificial food coloring from our diet. And we started taking nutritional supplements with amino acids. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but please note how exciting it was when Wesley, facial tics, violent temper, and seizures stopped within 4 days of supplementing him with amino acids. In closing, I'd like to say that the Environmental Protection Agency estimates that 1 out of 6 women carries unsafe levels of mercury in her blood, putting her fetus at risk. And the Center of Disease Control estimates that 1 out of 6 children have a learning disability. In my opinion, everybody should be tested for heavy metal toxicity before they conceive a child. A fetus in particular has the odds stacked against them if they're growing in a cesspool of toxins. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for that moving story and for sharing that about the amino acid.